Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's been a whole month since my last video. I'm so sorry about that. I did not mean to do that. Since you've last seen me, I've done 2 uni assignments, started my dissertation, moved house, which was not that easy during coronavirus, and I also had a short list of about 50 films that I thought could make this list, and I rewatched every single one of them to make sure that they were on this list. So that's why this has taken so long. I wanted this video to be right, I wanted to do it properly. So I present to you my favourite films. Now there's a lot of things that I have to kind of preface before I do this video. One of them is, I need to get this in straight off the bat, this is not going to be a ranked video. I know you probably want me to do like my top 10 or my top 20 ranked so you can find out my favourite film, but the God's honest truth is I don't really have a favourite film. And yeah, I could pick one for the sake of a list, but it would be disingenuous. It would probably change within like a week of me doing that video, maybe even, to be honest, I'd probably upload it and then the next day be like, ah shit, I wish I could have switched that. So I tried, for the last few months, I've known I had this video coming, and I've created countless lists on Letterboxd, private lists of my favourite films. I've tried to rank them, I've tried to do top 10s, top 20s, top 30s. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do more like what Jack Howard did, where he just kind of spoke about his favourite films, but he didn't rank them. So I'm not putting a number on it, like I'm not doing just 10 or just 20, and I'm also not ordering them. So this is just, I've got a piece of paper with me and I've written down all the films that I think deserve a mention. Some of them I'm just going to glide right by, some of them I'm going to speak in detail about, but let's get into it. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of do this in the order that I've written it. This is not in any order, it's just the order that I've written down on my pad. You'll notice there'll be a few like either filmmakers or genres or actors, and then after that it'll kind of be in chronological order vaguely, so let's go for it. So Kevin Smith is the first thing I wrote down. Kevin Smith, don't know if you can tell, but that is the poster for Clerks up there. Clerks is the film that made me want to make my own films and get into writing and stuff. It's not what I'd call a good film. It's not necessarily well made, but that's kind of the charm of it is, you know, the actors are clearly not professional actors. It's not well shot, it's not well lit, just like this. But what it does have is that it's well written. It's got a very witty script with things to say. It's got pop culture references. It's got just really interesting debates between characters, and it's relatable. If you've worked in retail, it's relatable. I've worked in retail, yeah. So Clerks is the film that I just watch it and I just go, you don't need a huge budget or even access to professional actors or anything like that to make a film. As long as you write a good script and there's passion behind it, you can make something that will invest people and that people are interested in and that will make you laugh, because Clerks is a fucking funny film. But it's got pathos to it as well. So yeah, Clerks is the first thing. I'll also briefly mention Chasing Amy and Mallrats, and maybe Zack and Miri Make a Porno. Alright, then I've just written down Jim Carrey. So my favourite Jim Carrey movies would be Ace Ventura, Liar Liar, and Yes Man. Back in the day when I was kind of growing up, Jim Carrey was probably my favourite actor. He's still one of my favourite actors, but obviously he's not really been in a great film or given a great performance, in my opinion, since Yes Man. I think that was the last time he was really Jim Carrey. It does look like he's kind of going back to that now though with Sonic and stuff, but I've not seen Sonic and I don't imagine that film would make this list. But yeah, Jim Carrey, man, what a guy. I know he's had some kind of weird kind of issues, kind of existential crisis type thing. Let me change that real quick. Isn't it weird that the lights went off as I said existential crisis? I'm spooked. Yeah, so he's had this weird kind of existential crisis thing going on. But back in the day, he was the funniest motherfucker when physical comedy and like slapstick comedy was a thing. Because that's the thing as well, like I'm not even a fan of slapstick comedy. For me, slapstick comedy, I think it's a very easy kind of lowest common denominator thing to do. Just, oh, hit someone in the head and have them fall over. Isn't that funny? Like, I prefer like witty jokes that have kind of got more like cleverness behind them or intelligence or, so, I don't know. I've never really been a fan of slapstick comedy. But even Jim Carrey is one of my favourite actors. Like that's how good he is. I feel like even people who don't like slapstick comedy will like Jim Carrey. And for me, Yes Man, Liar Liar, and Ace Ventura are the best ones, but he's still been in more dramatic stuff like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, The Truman Show. He's also been in, you know, obviously Dumb and Dumber, Bruce Almighty, I mean, The Mask. He's got a lot of good movies, that guy. All right, I put Pirates of the Caribbean with a question mark after it because I've actually only seen them once or twice. My girlfriend really likes them and she introduced me to them about 5-6 years ago, and we watched the whole trilogy and I remember loving the first 3. I remember I've seen 4 and 5 and I didn't like either of them that much, but the first 3 I loved them, but I haven't. They're one of the only films on this list that I've not had a chance to rewatch. So I've put a question mark just in case I rewatch them and I have a completely different opinion. But from what I remember from the first time I saw them, the first three Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I really loved them. I thought the kind of just the tone of them, like the swashbuckling adventure thing, and obviously Jack Sparrow, and just the action scenes, the way they were shot, and the soundtrack was memorable. And I loved Davy Jones as a villain. So yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean with a question mark or a hook. Kill me. All right, Lord of the Rings, obviously one of the greatest trilogies of all time, probably the greatest trilogy in my opinion. I think Lord of the Rings is the kind of thing, because it's such a big task to watch it. Like, I don't ever just watch one, I watch all three in a row. And I've got the extended edition, so I think that comes to about 11 and a half hours. So I don't watch them all that often. I probably watch them about once a year. But when I watch them, I fall in love with them all over again. And I go, like, Return of the King in particular is the one where I watch it and I just go, this is cinema. Like, this is about as good as movies can get, in my opinion. Just everything works. The characters, the themes, the kind of swooping cinematography, which at the time was not really... I think Lord of the Rings was kind of one of the first films to do that. Those big, like, mountain shots that just sweep and have the huge scale cinematography like that. The score, obviously, by Howard Shore is fantastic. The battle sequences are just epic in every meaning of the word. The first, like, 45 minutes or something of Fellowship of the Ring take place in the Shire, and they're just so... The world building is just next level. The world building is next level throughout the entire trilogy. But in particular, just there's something about being in the Shire for those opening like 40-ish minutes where it just like, because it has to contrast when they go to Mordor and when things get dire. So it's literally like this kind of safe haven, like it's almost like heaven on earth type thing. I could watch that forever. I could watch them just hanging out in the Shire forever. So I love those movies. Next I've got the MCU. I wouldn't say any MCU films are necessarily in like my absolute favourite films of all time. But I think collectively as a franchise, it deserves to be up there because it is one of my favourite franchises. The films that I've singled out are Captain America Civil War, Captain America The Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, the first Avengers, Infinity War and Endgame, Thor Ragnarok, and Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home. Yeah. I just think the MCU has done this thing where, I mean, there's nothing new I can say about it, but it's just a franchise that pretty much everyone loves. I absolutely love the world building. The characters are really what grounds it for me. Yes, the action's great and the humour and all that stuff is there, but at the heart of it all is the characters, and I think the MCU has done a fantastic job so far. Okay, now here's where they start to become chronological-ish. Some of them I'm just going to read the names out, some of them I'm going to talk more about them. So, I've got Singing in the Rain. That's probably the oldest movie I would say I love. I think that came out in like 1952. I remember I watched it at university for the first time, and usually when I watch stuff at university, usually they show us stuff that I'm just not generally a fan of. And I remember when they chose a bunch of films I didn't like, and they said, okay, we're going to watch Singing in the Rain next week. And I remember just being like, oh, but I'm going to hate it. And then we watched it, and within about 5 minutes, I was like, yep, completely on board, absolutely love it. Kind of gives you those La La Land vibes, and Damien Chazelle has admitted that, you know, Singing in the Rain was part of his inspiration for La La Land, and you can definitely feel that. The make 'em laugh sequence, just the way it's choreographed, and you know when they did that originally, and I forget what he's called, the guy who plays Cosmo, but he had flu, and they did it the first time, sorry, and I think they forgot to press record, so they had to do it later on, and he had flu during that sequence. So when you see him fucking backflipping off walls and shit, he's got the flu in that sequence. But yeah, just the characters, the music, the dance sequences. I'm a sucker for a movie about Hollywood anyway, and I love Singing in the Rain. All right, Drunken Master / Legend of the Drunken Master, my two favourite foreign movies, starring Jackie Chan. Great action sequences, great comedy, because Jackie Chan, he kind of did something unique where Bruce Lee was already on the scene, and Jackie Chan wanted to be Bruce Lee, but no one can out Bruce Lee. So the only thing Jackie Chan could do to kind of differentiate himself was to add comedy into the mix and kind of be the idiot while Bruce Lee was like the master. So you've got just these great montage training sequences of him doing really cool stunts. Obviously it's Jackie Chan, so he does them himself. So they're really well choreographed and they're so entertaining, but they're funny as well. And I love those films. Check them out if you haven't seen them, they're really fucking good. Okay, so now I've put the Star Wars movie. So Empire Strikes Back, I think, is probably maybe my favourite Star Wars movie. I definitely believe it's the best one. It introduces us to Yoda. It's the first time we heard the Imperial March. You've got one of the biggest plot twists in movie history. You've got the asteroid field sequence. Just so many iconic things from that movie. The atmosphere. I love the whole sequence where Yoda is training Luke on Dagobah. I think that's just so... I just love the atmosphere of it, man. Han has his classic, I love you, I know, line in that movie. There's one of the most iconic movies in history, but Star Wars in general, I love. I even really like Return of the Jedi, which I know some people say the Ewoks are stupid, but I don't care. I like that movie a lot. I have a lot of fun with it. The prequels I grew up on. The last act of Phantom Menace is really good. Revenge of the Sith is awesome. That's up there somewhere, I'd say, with one of my favourite Star Wars movies. I know it's a little bit lower quality than something like Empire Strikes Back, but nostalgia is a powerful thing, and yeah, literally that is like the one movie that, if any movie kind of captured my childhood, it's Revenge of the Sith. And Matt would probably tell you the same. I should also quickly specify, for some of the new subscribers, Matt is a guy that I used to do the channel with, and then he moved away, but we're moving back soon, so he's going to be back on the channel. But yeah, go watch some of the old videos with Matt, because they're probably a lot better. Yeah, so, and then even the new ones, I'm not going to lie, episode 8 and 9, I wasn't a big fan of either of those, but episode 7 I loved. I thought it recaptured the magic, introduced new cool characters, the action sequences, the music, all that stuff that I loved about Star Wars was there. So yeah, Star Wars. Alright. For the next few, I'm just going to list some off. So I've got Ghostbusters, Airplane, Naked Gun, Hot Shots, Back to the Future, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which in my opinion... I always said that Terminator 2 Judgment Day was probably the best action movie of all time in my opinion, but I recently rewatched Mad Max Fury Road, and I think now it's a three-way tie for me between The Dark Knight, Mad Max Fury Road, and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. But I love Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I think the action scenes by themselves are amazing, but it's got so much more than that. It's got so much emotion. It makes me cry every time I watch it. It's got a really good story, really deep, complex themes about time and humanity and kind of Blade Runner vibes in terms of like, just because you're not born and you're a machine, does that mean that you don't deserve kind of happiness and that you can't think like a human and all that kind of stuff? There's a lot of big ideas going on behind this. The score is so good. The direction by James Cameron is really good. And the special effects with the whole liquid metal thing were revolutionary. They still hold up pretty well today. And I will say, I said this in my Q&A video actually, but T-1000, in my opinion, is one of the best movie villains of all time. And for some reason, people seem to have forgotten him. But go back and watch that movie. The whole movie, you're just going, how are they going to beat this guy? There is no way to defeat this guy. Like, the whole movie, you're just going like, I don't see what they're constantly on the run. He's a constant threat. Everything that they do, he just beats it. But not in a way that feels like kind of bad writing. Like, he's just the concept of who he is. This guy's made of liquid metal. He can just get around he can just do anything. He can turn into anyone. He can shapeshift to look like anyone. That's terrifying. You never know, is John Connor really with Arnie? Or has he been like, oh, it's just so good. Watch Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Wayne's World, Army of Darkness, the Evil Dead movies, Dazed and Confused, maybe... Yeah, I would say, for me, Dazed and Confused is like the godfather of stoner comedy. I think it's the best one there's ever been. I don't see anything topping it anytime soon. One of the greatest soundtracks of all time. Probably even better than like Guardians of the Galaxy and Baby Driver. I love that Hangout movie. It's so well written. Love the atmosphere of it. Dazed and Confused. I love that movie. Groundhog Day. My boy Bill Murray again. One of my favourite movies that. If you want to know how to write character arcs, or if you want a good example of a character arc, watch Groundhog Day. Mention Clerks, Pulp Fiction, Clueless, the Toy Story movies. I have to stop here a little bit to talk about Pixar, because I was born in 1996, so for me Pixar was like, when I was like 4 or 5, kind of old enough to start watching and understanding movies, that was when they were coming out with things like Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and even throughout my whole childhood they were still coming out with gems like Ratatouille and Up and WALL-E and Toy Story 3. And then even in recent years, I know they've kind of taken their foot off the gas a bit, but they've still produced they're still made Inside Out and Coco. But the Toy Story movies in particular, for me, are just I love them so much. Toy Story 3 is one of the most emotional movies for me, because that came out when I was like 14, I think. So I was kind of at that age where I was saying goodbye to my childhood, and I'd kind of fallen out of touch not too long ago with friends from primary school, and you know, just it's so good, but well written as well. Like, not just the emotion, but the whole prison break, like almost reverse heist aspect is really good. Lotso, I think, is probably the best villain in Pixar history, unless I'm forgetting someone. But yeah, I love Toy Story so much. All right, Good Will Hunting. You want to talk about emotion? Good Will Hunting might just be the most emotional movie in the world for me. Good Will Hunting is just, I don't even know what words I can use to it just fills me with joy. Like, if you don't know what Good Will Hunting is, it's a movie starring Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Minnie Driver, who I always wish was in more stuff, and Robin Williams at his absolute best. And it's about a guy who is basically a genius, but he's just fallen in with the wrong crowd. And Robin Williams is I believe it's his therapist, and he has to try and bring out the best in him. And it's so fucking wholesome and heartwarming, and it's got enough kind of 90s cheese to it to feel nice and nostalgic, but not too much to kind of take away from the experience. But that's the kind of movie where when it finishes, I just have this feeling in me where I'm like, oh, that hit the spot. I love Good Will Hunting, so fucking good. All right, The Big Lebowski. Actually, that's probably a better movie. That's probably a better stoner comedy than The Dazed and Confused. But I don't really see it as a stoner comedy. It's got like stoner elements to it, but it's not like the whole movie. It's kind of more than that for me. There's Something About Mary. That's the movie that I should talk about, because I think this is one that's going to surprise a lot of people. I don't really hear anyone ever mention that film, but it's really good. It came out in the late 90s. It was directed by the Farrelly brothers, who did Kingpin and Dumb and Dumber. It stars Ben Stiller, Cameron Diaz, Chris Elliott, Jeffrey Tambor, Lynn Shay, Keith David, Sarah Silverman, Lee Evans, who I've met and was the nicest fucking guy in the world. It's such a funny movie. It's such a feel-good movie. It's one of those movies that it's not like a good film, you know, but I just love it. Like, it takes place in like sunny Florida, and it's just so easy to watch. Such a feel-good, easy movie. It reminds me of my dad as well, because my dad introduced me to that film. It's kind of, I think it's one of my dad's favourite films, maybe. It's kind of up there for him, I think. And yeah, it's got so many hilarious films. There's one joke in that movie that I don't know if any other joke in the world can do this for me, but there's one joke in that movie, because the Farrelly brothers are really good with physical comedy. And there's one joke that makes me laugh every single time. Not just when I watch it, if I just watch it on YouTube, if I watch the trailer, every time. And it's where the dog jumps up, Ben Stiller ducks, and then it cuts to the shot of it flying out the window. Like, that shot, just watch the trailer. I think it's towards the end. Just watch that shot. If that doesn't make you laugh, I don't know what will. But yeah, I love There's Something About Mary. All right, Fight Club, Snatch, Lock, Stock, and more recently, The Gentleman. I used to be really big on Guy Ritchie. He was one of the writers, like, when I first got into writing, it was Guy Ritchie's, it's kind of Guy Ritchie's and Quentin Tarantino's early crime movies that kind of inspired me to want to be a writer. So I do have a very soft spot, in particular for Snatch, which, by the way, I think is my dad's favourite movie. Snatch is so good. Unbreakable, Meet the Parents / Meet the Fuckers, Spider-Man. Oh, now we're getting to it. All right, Spider-Man. So Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, when I was trying to come up with a top 10 list, they were both on there. Well, actually, I decided to do one per franchise, so I took out Spider-Man and I left Spider-Man 2. But right there, my guy, love me some Spider-Man. Those original movies, they're just, like, I am genuinely a fan of the MCU. But when you go back and you watch the Raimi movies, the Spider-Man movies, they're so much more cinematic. Like, yeah, the scope isn't as big as Avengers, but you can just feel the love and the passion behind every frame. The way they're shot is so much more inventive. Spider-Man 2 in particular dives a lot deeper into Peter Parker's psyche. Just the action sequences, the villains in that trilogy are really good. I just love it so much. I love that trilogy. And even more recently, Into the Spider-Verse was really good. Far From Home, I think I've watched that like 3 times, and every time I watch it, it goes up my list of Spider-Man films to the point where it's now, I might go as far as to say it's my favourite Spider-Man film since Spider-Man 2. I'd have to rewatch them all to make sure of that, but I just love Mysterio. I think the action's really well shot. I love the light-hearted vibe of it. I'm a big Spider-Man fan. All right, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Edgar Wright's probably my favourite director in the world. Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are probably the 2 films I've seen the most amount of times. I definitely would have put one of those on my top 10 list. I was always a Shaun of the Dead guy, but in recent months I've watched both of them again, and I think I might be leaning towards Hot Fuzz now. But I think they're so well written. There's so many setups and payoffs, and they're funny, but they're more than that. Like, they're both kind of spoofs of zombie movies and cop movies, but even if you took out all the spoof elements, they would still work as straight up zombie movies and straight up cop movies. I think they're two of the smartest written films I've seen and two of the best edited films I've seen, and they're just rewatchable as hell. They're quotable as hell. I would say most of my friends, my girlfriend and most of my friends, Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead tends to be one of their favourite movies for pretty much everyone I know. Like, I know that quite a lot of this audience is American, so I don't know how big Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are in America, but in Britain, they're pretty much the gold standard for comedy. So yeah, I love those. Okay, I'm going to rattle off some Seth Rogen films real quick. The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Pineapple Express, Knocked Up, Superbad, that would be in my top 10. I fucking adore Superbad. I'll come to that in a minute. This Is the End. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I love me some Seth Rogen and some Judd Apatow. But Superbad, I think Timothée Chalamet said that Superbad is like the Mean Girls for guys, and I think he's right. I also think it's kind of like the Breakfast Club almost of our generation. Like, I don't know how it translates to older generations, but Superbad for me is one of the funniest films I've ever seen, one of the most rewatchable films I've ever seen. But not only is it hilarious, it's got heart, and you can't say that about a lot of comedies. But I think that's why John Hughes was so successful, because his films, they were funny, but they were so much more than that. They were genuinely relatable. They had stuff to say. They got you in the feels, and that's what Superbad does for me. I've seen that movie so many times, and I'll continue to watch it. It's also got one of my favourite casts ever. In terms of a comedy cast, it can't get much better than this, can it? Seth Rogen, Bill Hader, Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Emma Stone, Joe Lo Truglio, Kevin Corrigan, Danny McBride as a cameo. It's just so good, that film. I love it. Juno, that's one that it shouldn't be a guilty pleasure film because there's nothing wrong with Juno, but I feel like it's associated with girls, like quite a girly film. But Juno is another one of those. It's so well written. You always hear about Marvel sticking to the kind of screenplay formula and how that can be a hindrance sometimes, but Juno is a prime example of how it can be done well. It hits all the beats exactly how it should. It's a very basic script. It's stripped down, but it works so well. It's simple, but it's effective, and it's got this quirky charm to it, and it just leaves me feeling, again, kind of like Good Will Hunting. I watch it and I just feel kind of fulfilled. All right, The Dark Knight, obviously, one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. Many would say the greatest movie ever made. I read an interview in The Guardian. I can't remember who it was that said, but it was some film director, and he said that The Dark Knight is the godfather of like our generation, and he's completely right. Like, again, kind of like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, but to a much even greater extent than that. So many people that I know have The Dark Knight as their number one film of all time. For me, it's not quite number one, but I've seen it a lot of times. Heath Ledger's Joker is quite possibly the greatest character and the greatest performance ever put on film. If you haven't seen The Dark Knight, I don't know how, but I think it's like the 4th highest rated movie on IMDb. The Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, is generally considered to be the greatest movie character of all time. It's thematically rich, it's got really memorable scenes, it's got great action sequences, it's just amazing. Now, going back to the spoof movie thing, I love Scream, very good. The Bill and Ted movies, Super Troopers, Beer Fest, Club Dread, Jay Chandrasekhar, I put this on Twitter the other day, very underrated director. If you like silly comedies or stoner comedies, check out some of Jay Chandrasekhar's stuff because he's really good. Harold and Kumar, I love those movies. Tenacious D, Raising Arizona, The Matrix, Planes, Trains and Automobiles. I'm a big John Hughes fan. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is also one of my favourite films. I think that was around my top 10. So yeah, Planes, Trains and Automobiles. A film that not a lot of people have seen called Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist with Kat Dennings and Michael Cera. That's really good. It's a little bit evocative of something like Scott Pilgrim. Cool Runnings, really underrated movie with Rainn Wilson and Emma Stone called The Rocker. Cool Runnings, Cheaper by the Dozen, I love me some Steve Martin. Many of his other films could be on here as well, like The Jerk and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Parenthood as well. 500 Days of Summer, About Time, Die Hard's 1 and 3. Hot take, I think I actually might prefer Die Hard 3 to the first Die Hard. Die Hard with a Vengeance, the dynamic with Samuel L. Jackson, I love. I love both of those films. Kill Bill, Speed, Both Anchormans, another hot take, I actually think I prefer Anchorman 2 to Anchorman 1. There's a point in the first Anchorman where I kind of get a bit bored when he starts doing the jazzy shit on the flute. The second one I think is hilarious. I think they both are, but that one in particular. In Bruges, Lethal Weapon, Predator, we're nearly done, don't worry. Tropic Thunder, Zombieland. I've got to mention Zombieland briefly because I remember I went to CEX one time and I just picked out a load of DVDs, and I remember I got Zombieland and I left it for months because I just expected it to be terrible. And then I stuck it on and I was just in love with it. And I love Zombieland to this day. Again, it's got heart, it's got comedy, it's got a good soundtrack, it's got good action set pieces. Emma Stone and Bill Murray, my favourite actor and my favourite actress, irrespectively, are both in that film. Love me some Zombieland. I Love You Man, Inglourious Bastards, Crazy Stupid Love, Django Unchained. I want to talk real quick about Django Unchained. That was definitely my top, I think that was in my top 5, Django Unchained. I love that film. I've talked about it before, so I won't go into too much detail, but I love Django Unchained. I think the cinematography, the soundtrack, the action set pieces, it's got one of the best scripts. I mean, it won Best Original Screenplay, I believe, and it deserved it because it's got a very good script, so quotable, the dialogue is insane. You know, the villain, the performances. I mean, Jamie Foxx is great as Django, but he's completely outshone by the Oscar-winning Christoph Waltz, who he won the Best Supporting Actor for Dr. King Schultz in this movie, and he's completely outshone by Leonardo DiCaprio as Calvin Candy, and he's completely outshone by Samuel L. Jackson as Stephen. Like, the cast, the performances, it's entertaining as hell, it is sad, it's got some really dire moments to it, the soundtrack, the costume even, like when Django puts on that blue suit, that's one of my favourite shots actually in cinematic history is in Django Unchained, which is when he goes up to the Brittle brother and he has the whip in his hand, and the guy turns around and the camera like pushes in, and he's wearing that blue suit, and the music goes wah 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 wah. That is just the hero shot, the suit, the history behind that shot. Such a good movie. I love Django Unchained so much.